They left her to freeze in the snow until the Alpha King found his mate among the dead. The world was buried under a thick sheet of snow, every tree bowed under the weight of frost, and every path hidden beneath the unbroken whiteness. In this frozen wilderness, life was fragile, fleeting, and cruel. Leora's breath came in ragged bursts, clouds of vapor mixing with the icy gusts. Her legs trembled as she stumbled through the knee-deep snow, her once sturdy cloak torn and soaked, clinging to her shivering body. She had thought she could outrun them, her family, those she had once trusted who had betrayed her without a second thought. But betrayal had a long reach, and now she was alone, left to die where no one would find her. The snow whipped around her, stinging her cheeks, numbing her fingers. Leora's lips were cracked and raw, her skin pale as the moonlight reflecting off the frozen ground. Every step felt heavier than the last. She fell onto her hands and knees, the cold gnawing through her bones. For a moment she closed her eyes and let the snow cover her face, wondering if surrender was easier than struggling. But even in the depths of despair, her spirit would not break. Somewhere deep inside, a spark of stubborn will refuse to die. She forced herself up, dragging her body through the snow, one agonizing step at a time. She did not know where she was going. She only knew that stopping meant death. Suddenly, a sound reached her ears, not the howling wind, but something deeper, primal. A low, rumbling growl rolled over the mountains, vibrating through the frozen air. Leora froze, her heart hammering in her chest. Her instincts screamed to hide, to flee, yet her legs refused to move. From the shadows of the jagged cliffs ahead, a figure emerged. At first it seemed part of the storm itself, dark and shifting, powerful and unyielding. Then, as it drew closer, she saw the gleam of eyes like molten gold. The creature moved with a grace that belonged to neither man nor beast, a predator yet somehow regal, commanding the snow itself to yield beneath his presence. Leora's breath caught. The stories her village whispered around firelight surfaced in her mind. The tales of the Alpha King, ruler of the hidden wolf kingdom that no human dared approach. They said he was as cruel as he was powerful, a king bound by ancient magic, claiming the fates of all who crossed him. And yet, there was something else in his gaze, something that made her heart both fear and long at the same time. The Alpha King stopped just a few paces away. His eyes fixed on her as though he could see the story of her soul written in the frost on her skin. Leora tried to speak, to call out for help, but the cold had stolen her voice. He knelt, his gloved hands reaching toward her, and with a strength that made her gasp, lifted her from the snow. She felt herself suspended between life and death, held by someone who could either save her or end her. "You are mine," he said, not with a question but with a certainty that seemed to echo through the mountains themselves. His voice was deep, commanding, yet strangely gentle, like the sound of the river under ice. Leora's eyes widened. What did he mean? She was not his. She had nothing to give, nothing to offer. She was broken, betrayed, and alone. He did not answer her thoughts. Instead, he turned, his cloak billowing behind him like a shadow of the storm, and began to carry her through the snow. Leora tried to resist, but her strength was spent. She felt herself sliding into unconsciousness, and yet she did not struggle. Perhaps she finally understood that survival now depended on surrendering, not to death, but to him. The journey through the snow seemed endless. Mountains rose like frozen titans around them, cliffs jagged and merciless, and the wind howled like voices of the lost. Yet the Alpha King moved with surety, as if guided by a force older than time itself. At last, they reached a cave, hidden behind a waterfall frozen solid. The warm glow of firelight spilled from within, soft and inviting. Leora felt warmth creeping back into her fingers and toes, a sensation she had almost forgotten. He laid her gently on a bed of furs, and for the first time, Leora could see him fully. He was taller than any man she had ever known, broad-shouldered, with hair the color of midnight and eyes that burned with an inner fire. His features were sharp, almost predatory, yet there was a weight to his presence that suggested he carried more than mere power. There was loneliness, and perhaps even sorrow, hidden behind the strength. "You are safe now," he said, his voice softer than before. "But you must understand, this is not a gift, it is a bond. You were left to die, yes, but fate has brought you to me. I do not give life lightly, nor do I allow it to be taken again." Leora tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Why me? I am nothing. I am alone." He knelt beside her again, his golden eyes searching hers. "You are not nothing," he said, "and you are not alone, not while I am here. You are my mate, whether you know it or not. And the bond we share, it is older than any curse, older than any betrayal. I will not let anyone take you from this world, not even those who claim to be your family." Her heart thundered in her chest. Mate. The word was strange, foreign, and yet it felt like the echo of a truth buried deep within her soul. She wanted to reject it, to push him away, to assert her independence, but every fiber of her being trembled with a pull she could not resist. The Alpha King rose, moving to the fire, and began to clear a small space for her to rest. "Rest now," he commanded, not unkindly. "You will need strength for what is to come. The world you knew is gone, and a new life waits for you if you are willing to claim it." Leora's eyes wandered to the flickering firelight. Shadows danced on the walls of the cave, forming shapes that seemed almost alive. Memories of her family's betrayal flashed in her mind. Her mother's cold eyes, her siblings' cruel laughter, the knives that had driven her from home. Anger burned briefly, hot and fierce, but it was soon replaced by exhaustion, by the aching emptiness of hunger and cold. She closed her eyes, letting herself fall into the warmth of the furs, into the strange comfort of his presence. Somewhere deep in her mind, a question lingered. Could she trust him? Could she surrender to a power she did not understand, to a destiny she could not see? Outside the cave, the storm raged on, as if the mountains themselves were testing the bond forming within. The wind screamed, snow swirled, and shadows stretched long and thin across the frozen earth. And yet within the cave, a fragile warmth began to bloom, one of safety, of connection, and of a promise that the frost of her past might one day melt. But the world beyond the cave was not still. Unseen eyes watched the mountains, and unseen hands moved in the shadows. Those who had left her to die had not forgotten. Greed, envy, and dark magic stirred in the north, plotting to seize power, to destroy the Alpha King, and to reclaim what they believed belonged to them. Leora's arrival had set something ancient in motion, a chain of events that would test not only her survival, but the bond that had already begun to root itself in her soul. As sleep finally claimed her, Leora dreamed of wolves with eyes of gold running through the storm, guiding her through darkness, and a voice whispering her name, his name. A name she had never known, yet somehow felt she had always known. A name that promised safety, power, and love. The Alpha King watched her sleep, his gaze heavy with thought and emotion. He had found his mate among the snow, among the dead, and yet he knew this was only the beginning. The world was cruel, and enemies lurked in every shadow. But for the first time in centuries, he felt a flicker of hope, a fragile, trembling hope that perhaps the bond could survive, that perhaps she could survive, and that together they could face whatever darkness awaited them. And as the storm howled outside, the firelight casting flickering shadows on the walls of the cave, the Alpha King whispered a vow into the night. "I will not lose you, not to death, not to fate, not to those who would see you destroyed. You are mine. And I will claim you fully, even if the world itself stands against us." The snow fell silently outside, endless and unforgiving, hiding the mountains and the secrets they held. But inside the cave, for the first time, warmth and life fought back against the cold, and the bond between a forsaken woman and the Alpha King began to take root, fragile, uncertain, and yet unstoppable. The storm had passed, leaving the mountains blanketed in an endless sheet of snow. Sunlight shimmered on the frozen peaks, casting pale gold across the icy cliffs. Yet inside the Alpha King's fortress, carved from black stone and glistening ice, warmth lingered. Fires roared in great hearths, their glow reflecting on walls etched with the marks of centuries, telling tales of rulers, battles, and ancient magic. Leora woke slowly, the soft rustle of furs beneath her and the steady rhythm of breathing beside her easing the harsh memory of the snowstorm. Her body ached, every muscle stiff from cold and exhaustion. The room smelled of wood smoke and something faintly wild, like pine and the scent of the mountains themselves. When her eyes opened fully, she saw him, Kalen, the Alpha King, sitting across the fire, his golden eyes glowing with a quiet intensity. He studied her, not as a stranger, not as prey, but with a fascination that made her heart both fearful and restless. There was power in his gaze, yes, but also something gentler, a weight of responsibility and longing that drew her attention. "You are awake," he said, his voice steady, commanding, yet soft enough to hold a note of concern. "Good, you must eat, regain your strength." Leora tried to sit, wincing at the pain in her limbs. I do not understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why are you helping me? I am nothing. I was left to die." Kalen rose and moved toward her, each step measured like the predator he was, yet tempered with care. He placed a hand on her shoulder, firm but gentle. "You are not nothing," he said. "And you were not abandoned by fate. You were left to die by fear and greed, yes, but I am here now, and I will not allow your life to end in the snow. You are mine, Leora, whether you understand it or not." The words struck her like ice. "Mine," she echoed, trembling. "I am no one's, I am weak, helpless." He shook his head slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Weakness is not your measure, courage is. You survived the storm, you survived betrayal. That is no small thing. You have the spirit of a queen, even if you do not yet see it. And the bond we share, it cannot be broken, not by death, not by magic, not by men who fear what they cannot control." Leora stared at him, unsure what to think. Mate, bond, destiny. The words were strange, foreign, yet deep inside they awakened something she could not name. Something older than her pain, older than her fear. And even as she wanted to deny it, a part of her longed to believe them, to let herself be guided, protected, loved. "You will need strength," Kalen continued, breaking into her thoughts, "and you will need understanding. The world you knew is gone, and the laws of this place are not your own. Here you are under my protection, but you must also learn the ways of our land, the ways of the Alpha and his mate." Leora shook her head, frustration and fear mixing with curiosity. "I do not belong here. I am human, I am nothing like you. I do not belong in a world of kings and magic." Kalen's expression softened. "Belonging is not a matter of blood, Leora. It is a matter of spirit. You survived when others would have died. You fought against despair. That is why you were brought to me. That is why fate has chosen you." Her gaze fell to the floor, feeling the truth of his words even as doubt gnawed at her. Could she trust him? Could she surrender to this bond, to a king who was more powerful than any force she had ever known? And yet, even as fear whispered to flee, the bond inside her stirred, a pull she could neither fight nor ignore. Days passed, and Kalen guided her through the fortress, showing her the history etched into its stone walls. The stories were of kings and warriors, of magic that protected the land and bound the Alpha to his people. Leora listened, fascinated, her fear slowly giving way to curiosity. She began to understand the depth of his power and the responsibility it carried. Kalen watched her closely, noting the small signs of strength hidden beneath her exhaustion. She had survived betrayal and snowstorms, endured hunger and cold. Now, in the warmth of his fortress, he could see her spirit shining through the shadows of fear and doubt. He began to teach her, not with force but with patience, showing her the ways of the mountains, the forests, and the magic that hummed in the very air. "You must learn," he said one evening, his golden eyes reflecting the firelight, to see the world not only with your eyes but with your spirit. Danger lurks everywhere. Those who would see us destroyed are patient. They watch, they wait. You cannot fight them with fear. You must fight them with courage, with knowledge, with the bond between us. Leora nodded, determination mingling with uncertainty. She wanted to believe him, to trust him, yet her past whispered warnings she could not ignore. Still, as she studied the snow-covered mountains from the fortress windows, a strange hope began to take root. Maybe she could survive this new world. Maybe she could survive him. The bond between them grew slowly, subtle at first, like the warmth of sunlight creeping over frozen stone. Leora felt it in small moments, the way he looked at her, the way he instinctively guided her through the fortress, the quiet protection in his voice. At first, it frightened her, this closeness, this pull she could neither explain nor resist. But over time, it became a lifeline, a fragile thread connecting her to a world she had thought lost forever. One night, as the northern lights danced across the sky, Leora could not sleep. She wandered the fortress halls, her breath misting in the cold air, until she found Kalen standing on a balcony, looking out over the mountains. The glow of the aurora reflected in his golden eyes, making him appear almost otherworldly. "You are awake," he said without turning, his voice carrying over the wind. "Yes," she whispered, stepping closer. "I could not sleep. The night, it feels endless." He finally turned to her, his gaze soft but commanding. "The night is long, yes, but so are the bonds that guide us. You are stronger than you know, Leora, and the bond between us will guide you even through the longest darkness." Her heart thumped painfully in her chest. She wanted to speak, to ask what it meant, to understand the depth of the connection he claimed. But words failed her. Instead, she looked at him, and for the first time she saw not just a king, but a man, someone who bore the weight of centuries, who had known loneliness deeper than any she had ever felt, and yet still reached out to her. "You," she began, hesitating. "You are not just a king, are you? You feel things, strong things." Kalen's lips curved slightly, almost a smile, almost a shadow of sadness. "I feel because I must. I must bear the weight of this land, of my people, and now of you. It is a burden, yes, but also a gift. For in feeling we survive. In feeling we fight. In feeling we love." Leora's chest tightened. Love. The word seemed too heavy, too strange, yet inside her a spark ignited, a warmth that pushed against the cold and fear. Could she trust it? Could she trust him? Could she trust herself? Before she could answer, a distant sound broke the moment, a scream carried by the wind, sharp and filled with panic. Leora turned, alarmed, and Kalen's posture shifted instantly, tense and alert. "They are coming," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "Those who betrayed you, they have not forgotten, and your arrival here has drawn their attention." Fear surged through Leora, but it was tempered by a new determination. She was no longer the woman left to die in the snow. She had survived storms, betrayal, and despair. Now she would face this threat, whatever it might be, with the Alpha King at her side. Kalen moved toward her, his presence both shield and challenge. "You will not face them as you once did," he said. "You will face them as my mate, as my equal, as someone I will protect with every breath. But you must be ready. Trust in the bond, trust in yourself, and trust in me." Leora met his gaze, the firelight dancing in both their eyes. The pull between them was undeniable, a silent current that connected them, fragile yet unbreakable. She felt fear, yes, but also a strange exhilaration, a sense that for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she was meant to be. And then the night outside grew darker. Shadows moved along the fortress walls, silent and sinister. The wind carried whispers, faint and threatening, that promised danger, that promised betrayal, that promised a reckoning for the Alpha King and his newly found mate. Leora's heart raced. She knew now that survival would not come from hiding. It would not come from running. It would come from courage, from strength, and from the bond that had begun to root itself between her and Kaelin. And for the first time, she understood that this bond was not just protection, it was destiny. The Alpha King's hand found hers, warm and strong. "We face this together," he said, his golden eyes glowing in the firelight. "And whatever comes, I will not lose you." The fortress doors creaked under the wind, a warning carried by the storm beyond. And in that moment, Leora understood. The snowstorm had been only the beginning. The true test of her courage, her spirit, and the bond with the Alpha King was just beginning. The northern lights flickered over the mountains, casting shadows across the frozen world. And in the silence that followed, both Leora and Kaelin knew danger was coming, and it would demand everything they had together. The fortress was quiet now, but the air carried a tension that even firelight could not soothe. Outside, the snow-covered mountains glimmered under the moon, silent and beautiful, but hiding dangers that Leora could feel in her bones. Since her arrival, she had begun to sense the pull of something greater than herself, a magic woven through the land, through the mountains, through the bond she shared with Kaelin. She stood near the window, wrapped in furs, watching the northern lights shimmer across the sky. The colors moved like living spirits, pale greens and blues dancing across the frozen peaks. Her thoughts were restless, circling like wolves around a hidden prey. She had survived betrayal, a storm, and the freezing wilderness, but now she felt the stirrings of something else. Fear, yes, but also curiosity. A strange power was awakening inside her, something she could not yet name or control. Kaelin approached silently, his footsteps barely making a sound on the stone floor. "You feel it too," he said softly, standing beside her, his presence like a shield against the cold. She turned to him, her eyes wide. "Yes, I don't understand it. Something inside me. It's like fire and ice both at once." He nodded, golden eyes thoughtful. "It is your blood. Your lineage is older than most know. You were not left to die by chance. Your blood carries a power tied to this land and to the bond we share. It is why fate has brought us together. And it is why those who betrayed you cannot leave well enough alone. They fear what they cannot control." Leora shivered, not from cold but from the weight of his words. "Power me? I am just human. I don't know how to control anything." Kaelin placed a firm hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "Control comes with practice, patience, and courage. You survived snow, betrayal, and the wilderness because you have strength you do not yet see. I will guide you, but you must trust yourself and trust the bond between us. That bond is stronger than any curse, stronger than any spell." The nights passed with training. Kaelin guided her through the fortress halls, teaching her to sense the magic in the stones, the wind, and even the snow. At first, it was exhausting, her mind and body resisting the unfamiliar sensations. But gradually she began to feel the currents of power within her, faint and flickering, yet undeniable. "You are awakening," Kaelin said one evening as they stood in the highest tower, looking out over the frozen lands. "And that awakening will change everything for you, for me, and for those who would see us destroyed. But you must be ready. The bond we share will protect you, but only if you are willing to face the darkness." Leora's heart pounded. "I don't know if I am ready. I don't know if I can do this." Kaelin turned to her, his expression fierce yet gentle. "You do not have to do it alone, but you must try. Fear is natural, yes, but courage is what binds us together. It is what will allow you to survive the coming storm." The first sign of danger came quietly, almost imperceptibly. Shadows moved differently in the halls of the fortress. Whispers threaded through the air like a winter wind carrying secrets. Leora felt them before she heard them, an ancient magic, dark and cruel, reaching toward her, testing the boundaries of her awakening power. Kaelin sensed it too. He had felt these currents before long ago when he had faced enemies who sought to claim the Alpha's power. He could feel the pull, the weight of something ancient and vengeful moving toward them. "The curse is awakening," he murmured, more to himself than to Leora, and it will not rest until it is sated. That night Leora dreamed of shadows crawling through snow, of voices whispering her name with malice and hunger. She saw a dark figure, a sorcerer, cloaked in black, eyes gleaming with greed, chanting over a frozen altar. The dream ended with her being cast into a pit of ice, screaming, powerless. She awoke with her heart pounding, sweat chilling on her skin despite the warmth of the fire. Kaelin was awake as well, watching her with an intensity that made her uneasy yet strangely comforted. "You saw it," he said softly. "The sorcerer, he has been waiting for you. Your blood, your bond, it calls to him. And now that you have awakened, he knows where you are." Leora swallowed hard. "Then, what do we do? How can we stop him?" Kaelin's jaw tightened. "We fight. Not with brute force alone, but with knowledge, courage, and the bond between us. You are not helpless, Leora. You have survived more than most could imagine. Now, you must learn to use the power that has always been within you." Days became a rigorous rhythm of training, practice, and study. Kaelin guided her through the techniques of focus and control, teaching her to feel the flow of magic through her body. At first it was frustrating. Flashes of power erupted unpredictably, sometimes burning, sometimes freezing, always wild. But gradually she learned to harness the currents, letting the magic respond to her will. One morning, as frost-laden sunlight filtered through the tower windows, Kaelin took her to a hidden garden within the fortress, a place untouched by snow. There, among the frozen blossoms, he demonstrated the delicate balance between power and control, showing her how to direct energy without fear, how to channel it like a river rather than a raging storm. "You have more strength than you realize," he said. "And with the bond between us, you are nearly unstoppable. But remember, power without discipline invites danger. The sorcerer will test you, tempt you, push you to your limits. You must not falter." Leora nodded, determination settling in her chest like a fire newly lit. For the first time, she began to believe that she was not merely a victim of circumstance, but someone capable of shaping her destiny. And as she looked at Kaelin, standing strong and unwavering beside her, she felt the pull of the bond more strongly than ever, a current of warmth, trust, and something deeper, unspoken. Then, one evening, the warning came. From the high walls of the fortress, scouts reported movement in the northern forests, a gathering of dark shapes, cloaked in shadows, moving silently through snow. The enemies who had left Leora to die were approaching, guided by the sorcerer's magic. Kaelin's expression hardened, his eyes glowing golden in the firelight. "They are coming," he said, "and this time they will not hesitate. You must be ready, Leora. The curse, the sorcerer, they will try to take everything from us, but we will not allow it." The fortress prepared for battle, its halls alive with the murmurs of guardians, the sharpening of weapons, the tension of anticipation. Leora felt fear gnawing at her heart, but it was tempered by resolve. She was no longer the woman left to freeze in the snow. She was an ally of the Alpha King, his mate, his equal in courage and spirit. As night fell, the sorcerer's army descended upon them. Shadows moved through the trees, cold wind carrying whispered threats and the tang of magic. Leora and Kaelin stood side by side on the highest battlements, their hands brushing, the bond between them pulsing with energy. "You are ready," Kaelin said, his voice low but unwavering. "Remember your strength, remember the bond, and no matter what comes, I will not lose you." Leora's heart raced. I will not let them win," she said, her voice steady despite the storm around them. "I will fight." The first attack came like a storm of shadows, figures moving with unnatural speed, magic crackling in the air. Kaelin moved with the grace of a predator, deflecting, striking, guiding Leora with steady hands and a keen eye. She felt the currents of magic within her respond, her newfound strength rising to meet the danger. For a moment the world was chaos, snow and shadow, fire and ice, magic and steel clashing under the northern lights. But amidst it all, Leora felt clarity. She was not alone. She was bonded. She was alive, and she would survive. The battle raged on, and as the first snow of dawn fell, they stood victorious, exhausted, bruised, but unbroken. Yet Kaelin's golden eyes were dark with worry. "This was only the beginning," he said quietly. "The sorcerer will not rest, and the curse is still awake. We have survived today, Leora, but tomorrow will bring new trials, new dangers, and new tests for the bond that binds us." Leora looked at him, determination blazing. "Then we will face them, together." The mountains were silent now, the northern lights fading as the sun rose over the frozen peaks. But deep in the forest, unseen eyes glimmered, watching, waiting. The sorcerer had been forced to retreat, but his vengeance was far from over. And as Leora and Kaelin stood side by side, the bond between them stronger than ever, the shadows stirred, whispering promises of trials yet to come. The mountains were quiet now, though the air was thick with tension. Snow blanketed every cliff and valley, reflecting the pale light of the rising moon. Within Kaelin's fortress, Leora and the Alpha King stood ready, the bond between them pulsing like a living thing. Leora had changed. The fear that had once gripped her in the snow was gone, replaced by a fierce, steady strength. She had learned to feel the currents of magic within her, to direct them, to let the bond with Kaelin guide her. She was no longer just a survivor, she was a fighter, a partner, an equal. Kaelin watched her carefully, his golden eyes filled with pride and caution. "Tonight," he said, his voice low and steady, "we end this. The sorcerer will not stop until he claims what he believes is his. But he underestimates you, underestimates us." Leora nodded, her hands clenched into fists as the power within her thrummed, steady and strong. "I will not let him harm us. Not you, not anyone here." The fortress gates groaned as the wind pushed against them, and beyond the walls, shadows moved like living smoke. The sorcerer had returned, cloaked in darkness, flanked by figures warped by his magic. He had learned, grown stronger, and was now more dangerous than ever. Kaelin stepped forward, his presence radiating strength. "Remember the bond," he said. "Trust in it, trust in yourself. Together we are unstoppable." The sorcerer's voice rose in a chant that carried through the frozen night, sharp and cruel. "You cannot hide Alpha. You cannot hide what is mine." Magic surged through the air, dark and suffocating. Snow whipped into a frenzy, ice rising from the ground like jagged teeth. Leora felt the currents of her own magic rise in response, the power inside her flowing with clarity, fueled by fear, anger, and determination. She felt Kaelin beside her, his presence steady, protective, and unyielding. The battle began. Shadows clashed with light, magic with magic, steel with steel. Leora moved with purpose, her hands shaping the energy around her, bending it to protect the fortress and the bond she shared with Kaelin. She no longer felt fear. She felt focus, courage, and a strange exhilaration that only came from surviving against impossible odds. Kaelin fought beside her, his strength unmatched, but he never overpowered her. Instead, he guided her, teaching her through action, moving in perfect harmony. Every strike, every motion, every surge of power was a conversation between them, silent but complete. The bond they shared was more than strength. It was trust, understanding, and a connection deeper than either had ever known. The sorcerer unleashed his most powerful spell, a black storm of magic that ripped through the snow and threatened to swallow everything. Leora felt the pulse of it, dark and cold, trying to reach into her to shake her confidence. But she stood firm, reaching into her own power, drawing strength from the bond that tied her to Kaelin. "Now!" Kaelin shouted, and together they struck. Leora let the currents of magic flow freely, her fear replaced by certainty, her anger tempered by focus. The energy surged outward, meeting the sorcerer's storm with a brilliance of light and warmth. For a moment the world seemed to shatter, snow and shadow mixing in a dazzling, blinding display. When the light faded, the sorcerer was on his knees, his magic fractured, his shadows retreating. Leora's chest heaved with exhaustion, but a smile flickered across her face. Kalen stood beside her, his hand brushing hers, the bond between them stronger than ever. "You did it," he said, his golden eyes shining with awe and pride. "You were incredible." Leora looked at him, a mixture of relief and newfound confidence in her eyes. "We did it." Together, the remnants of the storm dissolved into the night. Snow fell gently, quiet and soft, washing over the battlefield. The mountains seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, as if the land itself acknowledged their victory. But even in triumph, Kalen's expression was serious. "This is not the end," he said softly. "The bond, the magic, it has drawn attention. Others will come, but now you know your strength. Now you know the bond, and together nothing can destroy us." Leora's gaze met his, and for the first time she truly felt the depth of their connection. It was not just survival that tied them together. It was trust, understanding, and a profound sense of belonging. She had been left to die in the snow, betrayed by those she had loved, but she had found life, strength, and love in the most unexpected place. The fortress slowly returned to normal, its guardians and inhabitants tending to the aftermath of the battle. Leora walked through the halls, feeling the warmth of the fire, the weight of history in the stones, and the pulse of magic in the air. She no longer felt like an intruder. She felt like part of something greater, something eternal. Kalen followed her silently, his presence a constant reassurance. "You have grown," he said, his voice low, "stronger than I could have imagined. And yet there is still more for you to learn, more for us to face. But I will guide you, always." Leora nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and affection. "I trust you," she said. "I trust the bond and I trust us." The nights that followed were quieter, filled with training, study, and the slow unfolding of their connection. Leora learned to control her power fully, to harness the currents of magic with precision and grace. She and Kalen grew closer, their bond deepening in ways that were both tender and powerful. And yet the shadow of the sorcerer lingered in the north, a reminder that peace was fragile and vigilance was necessary. But Leora no longer felt fear. She had faced betrayal, death, and a darkness that sought to claim her life, and she had emerged stronger, bonded, and unbroken. One morning, as sunlight broke over the frozen peaks, Leora and Kalen stood on the highest balcony of the fortress, looking out over the mountains. The snow sparkled like diamonds, the world quiet and beautiful after the storm. Leora leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body, the steady strength of his presence. "We survived," she said softly, her voice filled with awe. "I never imagined, I never believed I could survive this." Kalen placed a hand on her shoulder, golden eyes fixed on the horizon. "You were never meant to survive alone," he said. "The bond brought you to me, and together we are unstoppable." Leora smiled, feeling the bond pulse between them, a living thing that filled her with warmth, courage, and a strange sense of peace. She had been left to die in the snow, abandoned, forgotten, but now she was alive, strong, and loved. She had found her place, her purpose, and her mate. Kalen's gaze softened as he looked at her, admiration and love shining in every line of his face. "You are more than I ever hoped for," he said, "and I will not let anything take you from me. You are mine, Leora. And I am yours." For the first time in her life, Leora believed it. She believed in the bond, in the strength within herself, and in the man who had saved her from the snow and claimed her heart. The mountains stretched before them, vast and unbroken, a testament to endurance, survival, and the power of bonds that cannot be broken. And as they stood together, the sun rising behind the peaks, the world seemed full of possibility, of new beginnings, and of a love that would endure beyond storms, beyond betrayal, and beyond time itself.